We're live.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the Rye City Council Candidates Forum. I'm Patricia Ranello, co-president of the Rye Brook and Port Chester chapter of the League of Women Voters. Before we begin, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to share a few things about the League of Women Voters. First, the League is nonpartisan. It neither supports nor opposes candidates. Our members are women and men from a wide variety of neighborhoods and political perspectives. And what we share in common is our dedication to encouraging the informed and active participation of people in our government at all levels. Your moderator for this evening is Maura Carlin. Ms. Carlin is a member of the Larchmont Mamaroneck League, and we thank her for being here this evening. So without further delay, I shall turn the evening over to Ms. Carlin. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. It's my pleasure to be here. And as you heard, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. So in accordance with league policy, I am not a voter in this district or this race. And I'd like to remind everyone that Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th, with polls open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Early voting is already going on, and it concludes on Saturday, November 5th. Details of locations and hours are available on the Westchester County Board of Elections website. Tonight, we have two candidates for the City Council seat to fill the unexpired term of a member who passed away. The term will end on December 31st, 2023, and neither candidate we have tonight is currently a council member. In alphabetical order, I will introduce them. We have Matt Fahey, who is running on the Republican line, and Lori Fontanes, who's running on the Democratic line. Our timekeepers this evening are Roz Lahr and John Leonard. Our timekeepers will give a 30-second warning with a yellow sign, and finally the red stop sign when the time is up. While we hope the candidates will conclude at that point, you may finish a sentence if you are in fact mid-sentence. On the format, for starters, the order of the opening and closing statements has been determined by the League and the moderator by random draw prior to the start of this forum. The order of responding to questions will alternate between the candidates. Throughout the forum, no comments of a personal or abusive nature will be permitted, and the moderator will rule this out of order. And to briefly outline the format for this evening, each candidate will have 2.5 minutes of opening remarks, followed by 10 league-prepared questions. Candidates will then have 2 minutes to answer each question. After a question has been answered by both candidates, each will be given 60 seconds for rebuttal. However, rebuttals are only to address factual inaccuracies made by the other candidate in their answers, or to briefly expound upon or clarify your answer. Rebuttal time is not to raise a new topic outside of the question topic. Following the lead questions, each candidate will have a 2.5-minute time period for a closing statement, and the order will be the reverse of opening statement. So if everyone's ready, we can begin. And Ms. Fontanes, you get to do your opening first.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Carlin. Thank you, the League of Women Voters, for hosting this and for your flexibility. Much appreciated. Thank you to my opponent, Matt Fahey, and to everyone who worked to make this important conversation happen. As I've learned in the past 6 months, the first question many ask is, why are you running for office? Some people say it this way, yikes, why are you running for office? And in these heated times, especially in Washington and Albany, I can see why they might be concerned for me. But regardless, I tell them that the reason I've put myself out there after years of living in this community is that I believe in public service. I've spent every year since we moved to Rye working on volunteer projects that are the heart and soul of this city. And I believe in the value of this work, and it's more important and more rewarding than I've ever imagined. As many of you have already heard me say, I come from a family of first responders and educators. We don't walk away from challenges, we raise our hands. So what are some of these challenges or even just areas of concern among residents? Since I've been listening to all of you for many months and really much longer as I've been working side by side with you for many years, I already know. I'm up to speed on everything from our biggest issues, flooding, development, to the sewer problems off of Oakland Beach Avenue, that condemned house in Hicks Park, tree removal. All across Rye, whether on a site walk while serving as a vice chair on the Conservation Commission or working on a project with one of the many wonderful institutions around town, I have seen firsthand what's going on. But what a great job, right? I get to spend time in this beautiful city with its lovely residents, so much kindness and so many caring people. And of course, I don't just listen to residents. I know the city staff as we've worked side by side on community initiatives for years. I know the council members and they know me. I talk to Rye business owners and ask them questions and listen to their answers because I've learned from my own parents who have run a small business for decades. I ask, I listen, I care. And now I look forward to a more detailed conversation on key issues with my fellow Rye resident, Matt Fahey. Thank you.
Mr. Fahey?
Thank you. I'd like to also thank the League of Women Voters, and I would like to thank my opponent for her willingness to volunteer to serve. We often forget that our elected officials here in Rye serve us not for a paycheck, but for the opportunity to improve our town. I know how much of a commitment this is, as I previously served from 2004 to 2007 on the council. Back then, the primary concern was fiscal discipline. Now we have different challenges, and I'd like to explain why I'm volunteering again to serve. First, I love Rye. I grew up in this town, and I'm proud to call it my home for close to a half a century. I'm thrilled that my wife and I were able to raise our 3 sons here. Rye offers a great community, great recreational opportunities, including boating, golfing, tennis, fishing, and wonderful parks and playing fields. Downtown has a variety of businesses and restaurants. Second, I know what I'm getting into. I've done this job before. I know the components of the city's budget, the annual review process, the capital expenditures plan, our fiscal policies and procedures, the roles of our various departments, and I know and have worked with many of the staff as well. I can hit the ground running and won't be learning on the job. Third, aside from doing what's best for Rye, I have no agenda. I'm not affiliated with any political party and have no commitment to defending any one group over any other. I believe party politics simply have no place in Rye. I hold no allegiance to the GOP nor to the Democratic Party. Fourth, I also personally know all sitting council members and have known many of them for years. Any committee or board benefits from a respectful dialogue between members while seeking out different viewpoints. I'm committed to listening to and considering all views and all voices. I've previously witnessed petty bickering on the city council and believe there's simply no place for it in Rye. Lastly, we face significant challenges. Rye's homeowners have invested most of their wealth in their property, and some have also spent years building businesses here. Premium placed on living and owning in Rye is reflected in our high real estate prices. We all know Rye is a wonderful place in which to live, work, and raise a family. We've also learned through repeated storms, hurricanes, and floods that our collective investment can be significantly damaged or destroyed, and our sense of security shattered in an instant. These are the reasons I'm running, and I'd love to have your vote. Thanks.
Thank you. We will turn now to the question. And Ms. Fontanes, you will answer first. Since Pathway 2000, Rye has experienced major flooding from hurricanes and tropical storms, Irene, Sandy, Henry, and devastation from Ida in September 2021. What projects can the city of Rye undertake to mitigate flood impacts during your term?
Thank you for that question. As you probably already know from anything that I've talked about in the media or as I served on the CCAC, flooding is a major challenge for the city of Rye. But I'm not going to give you a silver bullet in a year. I will be completely honest about that. all we can do, and I think Matt has said this as well, is continue to move the projects forward. The good news is that since the last hurricane, and that was Henri and Ida together, the rain rates alone caused all of this damage. But we have already started to look at the Blind Brook problem, which is a longstanding problem. I know because the city has taken this extremely seriously that we will make progress, but this is not going to happen fast. Mamaroneck was working on this. It took them since Superstorm Sandy to finally start to see some funding come through. How many years ago, right? How long does this take? So we need, I think, to be working on dual tracks, the sort of long-term infrastructure solutions that are partnerships with the federal and state government and whatever private public partnerships there can be, but also what can we do locally now with stormwater? And in fact, the city has been working on this as well, in tandem with hiring a consultant at a fairly large price, but absolutely necessary price. We're looking at things like the Blind Brook region, but we're also looking at what can we do with, for example, that sewer that I was talking about off of Oakland Beach. I've knocked on doors for people where their stories of devastation are just so incredibly sad, and they're worried when it rains that it could happen again. So we need to keep moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Fahey, same question?
Same question. Well, flooding has always been a problem in Rye, and for many years, too many, it was simply accepted as a known risk, particularly in areas with close proximity to Blind Brook and to Beaver Swamp Brook. Yet, when I last served on the council the last year, something changed. In 2007, Indian Village and downtown Rye were both hit with a big flood that destroyed homes and crippled businesses. It was labeled as the 100-year flood, which we had all heard about for years. And we all thought, okay, that's done. Well, then several weeks later, a second worse flood hit. And with that second worst flood, which that really had a huge impact psychologically in the town. In the last 15 years, this happened again and again and again with Irene, Sandy, Henri, and Ida. That was not fun to live through. We can no longer pretend that this is not the new normal. And we've got to become more like the Dutch and realize that flood mitigation is a constant and permanent part of our life here in Rye. I'm encouraged by all the work the existing council has been doing and continues to do with respect to flood mitigation. There's more work still to be done in front of us. We need to complete and update our hydroengineering studies, work with professional facilitating consultants to identify projects that are worthy, and we have to find funding for it. We cannot afford to do this on our own. We need funding from federal and state officials and from programs like FEMA and the recent Build Back Better program. We need to tap into the vast resources available through state and federal grant money. And we need to hold our county and state officials accountable in working with us and our upstream neighbors to get this resolved. It's a complex issue. It's not going to be solved overnight. So the city needs to stay focused on this and engaged until substantial progress has been made and continue to work on it. I'm also greatly encouraged by the recent change in attitude within the city staff. In the past few years, they've changed from it's nothing we can do about it to we will become active and equal partners with you in securing funding. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there a rebuttal, Ms. Fontanes?
I just want to add to that a little bit. I'm in agreement with Matt on much of this. When I was serving as the vice chair on the Conservation Commission Advisory Council, that is in fact one of the wetlands commissions in this city. So I've sat in the room. I've sat in that little room off of the main chambers where we looked at these plans. I have seen the developers come in. They know me, they're attorneys. We've listened. We've heard staff discuss this. The Planning Commission is very familiar with this too. So this needs to be also working in partnership with the committees and commissions that already exist in the city and who are very familiar with each of these parcels.
Thank you. Mr. Fahey?
I'd just like to point out that developers aren't necessarily the biggest problem. I think a bigger problem has been historically that we just simply accepted it's going to happen. And I think if we strike the right tone with developers and change our zoning codes to better protect us from flooding, they're going to get the joke and they're going to be more partners in this.
Well, that gives us our next question, which you will get first, Mr. Fahey. Many people feel the developers have taken over the city. Do you feel changes need to be made to the current zoning code that would restrict the size of construction of private homes so that they conform proportionately to the size of the property it is being built on? And does the building code adequately protect neighbors from construction that increases the surface water burden?
That's a very complex question. And I think it reflects on the fact that our zoning laws definitely need to be upgraded and reviewed. The city council has recently made some changes to the zoning laws. They have banned flag lots unless they can get a, I assume everyone knows what a flag lot is, unless they have a wide enough offset of 75 feet. They have made it more restrictive to have steep slopes, building on steep slopes. But when you look at our zoning laws and what can be and can't be done, oftentimes builders go beyond what the code allows, and they go in front of the builders would go in front of the BAR, and the attitude of the BAR, the way it was written previously, made it very difficult for them to say no. And if they did say no, it was often overturned by the ZBA. And the city council recently made changes to make it easier and more interpretive from the part of the ZBA to say no to developers. And again, I'm not on the side of developers, but I do think that if we give them clearer guidelines and let them know under no certain circumstances is this going to be allowed, it is in their best interest. We should make it in their best interest financially to abide by the law. Years ago, somebody was, I was told the story, it's too good not to be true, that somebody asked for permission to enclose a porch and they were given that permission. And the city engineer drove past the lot one day and there was no more house there. And the developer was putting up a new house. And the city engineer went to the property developer and said, we're going to have to fine you. And the person said, go ahead. I know the fine's only $5,000. That to me is outrageous. It should be, we're going to fine you. You're not going to be allowed to build here for 5 years. And it's a significant fine. You're going to have to take this house down. That to me would have teeth.
Thank you, Mr. Fahey. Ms. Fontanes, same question.
So going back, I think, to the original question, they were asking, what can we do in terms of the scale of the housing? It's sometimes called mega mansionization. And then also what impacts that mega mansionization has on the neighborhood, including issues like flooding, including, we didn't mention this, but tree removal and what that does, how it changes not just the flood risk, but also heat. There are going to be many different risks in a time of climate crisis, and one of those is increased heat waves. So, it's also the character of the neighborhood that changes. So each of these things is not something that I disagree with Matt on this. I don't think we can just give them guidelines. I think what the residents of Rye are asking for is new laws, right? They're looking for it in the context of a new master plan, which we call comprehensive planning. And we're also looking at it in sort of the legislation that could possibly happen now. The flag lot issue, the steep slope issue is, in my opinion, just going around the edges of the problem. It's something is always better than nothing. But in terms of the actual number of parcels that have flag lots or had steep slopes after, the barn doors being closed after the cows are all out, is it's good, but it's not enough. So the question is what can we do on a dual track to look at these things? And the law has to be changed. You can't just beg somebody. You have to explain that this is what we want, and we're going to find a reasonable way to do this without, of course, impinging on private property rights. Most people's homes are a huge part of their assets. And so I think we need, a collaborative, creative solution to this, where people feel heard and they feel like the city really does care about them too.
Mr. Fahey, is there a rebuttal?
Just a quick one. Chapter 197, the zoning code, that is in fact law, and we do need to enforce that better, and we also need to improve it, and it needs to be overhauled. And that's what the city council has been doing with respect to flag lots, with respect to steep slopes, and with respect to the process of appeals.
Ms. Fontanes?
Yes, I remember I followed that very closely, and I saw that the language, it's funny how in law, just a couple of words make a huge difference. And yes, they have given some tools to the Board of Appeals process. I think that it's a small measure, but I will take it. And I think most people will take that too. It's moving in the
Ms.
right direction.
Fontanes, you get the third question first. There are longstanding concerns related to much needed road resurfacing and sidewalk repair citywide. Please respond to these concerns and discuss measures currently being taken or that you feel should be taken to address these concerns.
Well, it's an interesting question because I think for the first time, and I think the council would agree with this, we are in fact seeing improvements in the pavement, not the sidewalks, but the paving of streets. I've been going all around the city, and even just in the last year, I've noted streets, not just my own, but my own was actually paved not that long ago as well. Some of it is in conjunction with the work that Con Ed has been doing. So it's sort of like we have to endure all of this disruption, but at the end of it, we did get a new road. So I agree with how the city staff is handling this. It doesn't make any sense to actually pave new road when Con Ed is about to rip it all up again. So there's a reasonable process for making this happen. Again, I think the city has improved their communications with the public about this. You can go on the website or you can sign up for notifications. They have an app now, and you can figure out when Con Ed is doing what, so you can anticipate and make your own plans around this paving. As to the sidewalks though, let me just say, public safety is a huge thing for me. As I said, I'm from a family of first responders and I walk everywhere, and everybody who's known me in Rye has known we used to walk to school, we walk to church. I'm a big walker, and not just in the parks, but on the streets. I love just walking around Rye. And there are places, we don't have as many sidewalks as many cities, but that should make it easier, right? So I think that between that and snow removal on these same sidewalks, I think it is something that we should actually double down and prioritize. And I would love to see that happen.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Fahey.
Okay, I agree. There has been some improvement in the past year or so, maybe a couple of years. A couple of years back, there were enough steel plates on our roads to build a small battleship, and you needed a battleship to get through those streets. The plates and the related construction caused significant wear and tear on automobiles and often disrupted normal traffic flow, made it very dangerous for pedestrians and people biking and with strollers. But once these projects are completed, the contractors typically slap some patches on the asphalt and move on to their next project. I've been told that they're supposed to come back and fix it. That never seems to happen. Case in point, downtown Belgian block intersection in front of the Rye Country store. That was only in place about a year or two before it was ripped up, and it looked great for a year. Then it was ripped up to repair a utility, has not been repaired since. We've been patiently waiting for repairs to be made for at least 3 years. And I think the utility companies often take advantage of what might be considered lax oversight and conveniently forget to repair what they're required to repair. Most residents are unaware of the reasons of these utility projects, whether it's maintenance or improvements to gas, sewer, water, or power communication lines. Regardless, they're a major complaint throughout Rye. And I think we need to do a better job in mitigating these disruptions and to hold the utility companies to task for changing and improving them. I'd like to see a citywide requirement of for any utility company to report on any planned or emergency activities with before and after photos with a maximum of 4 months of completion to ensure that these damages get repaired adequately to our satisfaction.
Ms. Fontanes, is there a rebuttal?
I would just enhance that a little bit further to say that one of the other, and I only know this because I actually am living next to two construction projects, giant construction projects, just like we've been describing. And I got a front row seat to exactly how that works, from the demo all the way to finally the lovely family moved in next door. But Matt, one of the things that happened was that they needed to enhance the gas line that went to this house on this tiny little street. So it had to get ripped up again. So it's not even just Con Ed. And yet again, the development has these, what we call in economics terms, externalities. So there are additional costs that aren't always calibrated when we're looking at what are the cost benefits of having development of this scale.
Mr. Fahey?
No, Ru, I think that's a fair point.
Okay, well, you get the next question first. Many residents have expressed a concern about the ongoing issue of lack of parking in the city. What solutions do you offer to resolve this problem?
To be flippant, I could say have less cars, but that's not really a legitimate idea. First off, this has been an issue for a number of years. If you read the 1946 city master plan and the 1985 city master plan, parking was a big issue. It has not changed. We addressed it back in 2004 with the advent of parking meters. It was a very contentious debate at the time. We installed the parking meters that absolutely made it better, but it's still a challenge. I think it's made worse by the fact that people seem to look at handicapped as an optional parking spot, even if they're young and spry at the age of 35 or so. They park in the middle of the road sometimes to just duck in just for a cup of coffee, and they end up chatting with a friend for 5 minutes and they're blocking up traffic. I don't think that oftentimes they get away with that. Not to be a scold, but I'd like to see more enforcement of that, more stiffer penalties. We have to be careful though. One of the reasons why we put in the meters was the idea was floated that we could put in a parking garage downtown. There's a couple of really bad things about that. Number one, it would look hideous in our downtown. I certainly do not want to see Rye become more like Harrison in that regard. And number two, it would take a number of years to build and design, and it would be even worse. I do think that other factors that we could do would be to promote higher fees possibly, or shorter parking times.
Thank you. Ms. Fontana, same question.
So absolutely, I'm one of those people who really, I can't stand it when I go downtown and can't get a parking spot. I have to plan my day based on, okay, when am I likely to have it? And I agree also that we do not need a parking garage. It would change the character of our central business district irrevocably. So what can we do? Well, I also think that the parking lots that as they exist now could be resurfaced. Perhaps we can look at different ways to arrange the existing space that we have. And I know that previous councils made a stab at that. They did change the flow of the sidewalks, and yet what I hear from people especially right after the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, that our elderly folks especially have trouble they need that access, not just in the handicapped area, but they're the ones who want to be able to park right there in front of the store. They don't want to be able to have to walk all the way from the farthest parking lot that they might be able to find a spot in. So some sort of dialogue with that community as well, I think, with the business owners, have maybe put together a working group to just focus on this issue. We have so many volunteers who are dedicated to helping everyone in the city. I think that there may be resources out there that we don't even know about. I think it's important, even though it is a perennial issue, it's not going away. So what creative solutions have other communities come up with, short of a parking garage, to encourage people to really enjoy our beautiful downtown?
Thank you. Mr. Fahey, anything further?
One additional idea that popped in my head. We should encourage more ability of people to bike downtown by having parking spots for bikes. That's a great way to get some exercise. It doesn't pollute, and bikes are certainly a lot easier to park than cars, and they take up less space. And it could get a lot more people downtown with bikes. We all live within 2 or 3 miles of downtown. 2 or 3 miles on a bike is not going to take you very long. So I'd love to see more opportunities to have people bike to town.
Ms. Fontanes?
So while we're spitballing, one of the first things that I had looked at when my child was still at Milton School, is we were also looking at the issue of parking around the schools. And so a couple of us had thought of maybe creating some sort of bus service, like an electric bus kind of thing, where you could, and this is maybe, again, a solution for somebody who's older, a way to get dropped off downtown, so it's not one car, one family, some sort of program, and only, of course, if it was funded in a creative manner as well.
Okay. Ms. Fontanes, you get the next question first. What is your position on where the city is financially And what would you recommend going forward in terms of spending, budget, tax cap, new revenue sources, and other fiscal policy?
Well, there's a couple of good pieces of news here. One is that we still have our AAA rating, as we've had for many years. And the main reason for that, and for the fact that, and I have to say, it wasn't a guarantee. We got through the pandemic years, the early pandemic years, when it wasn't clear what would happen, right? Thanks to, first of all, the professionalism of our city staff and the finance committee. These are dedicated volunteers, know what they're doing. The city council has a governance role here, but it's a team of people who care about this issue on all levels. So in terms of budget, in terms of tax, the percentage of our tax bill that is occupied by the city is relative. It's the smallest, and it's relatively small, but relative is a strong word. Anytime we can find a way to save the taxpayers' money, we need to do it. We need to pursue it. There is no such thing as a small tax. So I mean, the way I look at it, and I think this is how the residents of Rye look at it, is that we have to be always strict in what we do. So for example, we spent a lot of money on consultants. In some cases, like in the flood risk situation, we have no choice. We do not, this is not an in-house knowledge base. This is something that we need to spend money on. On the other hand, there have been projects that we have spent north of $100,000 on that that did not go anywhere. And that money is gone. So I think the idea that we have a more prudent way of handling things like consultants and projects, we just need to know going in, do the citizens really want this? Can we afford this? Where is the money coming from? And can we execute? Those, I think, are the criteria that any reasonable person would apply to all of these things.
Thank you. Mr. Fahey, same question.
Okay, I think from a financial perspective, we have come light years from the time I previously served in the council. And that reflects a number of years of dedicated work on the part of the city council and the staff in tightening up our financials, policies, and procedures. We no longer have the ability to put out a bond referenda for any idea we have at any time of the year. Recently, in the past 3 or 4 years, we had the challenge of COVID, and the city council was very, very adept at changing the way the city operates very quickly. They were very creative in what they did, and all that has led to some really, really good results. They maximized their outstanding debt as much as they could without having to go for public permissioning, for the simple reason that they knew they had a lot of projects that they had to address in a very short period of time. And that has saved us a ton of money. Interest rates right now are much higher than they were just a few months ago, much less years. And that has been very beneficial to the city. And I think that to continue in that vein, we really need to have keep our eye on the ball, that a lot is possible, but if you spend in an inappropriate manner, in an irresponsible manner, your options quickly become limited. And that's one thing that the city council, the existing council, has done a very good job of. They've been very frugal at times, and but they're not shy about spending money when it needs to be spent. They've currently got a lot of projects going on. These are necessary projects to keep the town in good shape. And it's not sexy stuff. It's things like rebuilding sewer lines, which we're legally obligated to do in the state of New York. And it's also improving our flood mitigation, which we are morally obligated to do. And I think they're, we're in much better shape because of all of the years of fiscal discipline in the past 15, 20 years.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Fontanes?
Just 2 enhancing points, I think. One is that part of what we had, the reason why we had to do this stormwater and sewage work is because we were part of a lawsuit, right? That Save the Sound, not just the city of Rye, but went to various municipalities where there were issues. And so, however, we got there, we're getting there. And the other point I want to make is that, so with the boat basin dredging, for example, where it looks like we will be contributing to that, not 100%, but those are things that are foreseeable. Anything that like dredging, which is going to happen, we need a plan for. It never gets cheaper not face things that we need to keep up. So that would be my prudent way to look at.
Mr. Fahey? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished?
No, yes.
Mr. Fahey?
One minor clarification, we are legally obligated to work on our sewer lines, but the stormwater lines are, that's something we have the option of doing, which we should do, because they're probably about 100 years old. They were built for a very different Rye, smaller Rye, fewer houses and smaller homes as well. But that's something that we need to do because that absolutely helps with the flood mitigation.
Okay, the next question is, what do you consider the most important capital projects to be addressed with the city's infrastructure outside of flood-related projects? Mr. Fahey, you get this first.
Oh boy, that's a very tough question because I think a lot of our infrastructure should be focused on and does impact flooding. With respect to a non-flooding related issue, I'm drawing a blank because I think flooding impacts everything, and we should not do anything in this town without thinking about and discussing at great length how this is going to be impacted by flooding. I would say street resurfacing is probably one that pops to mind, but there are things when you resurface a street that you should take into account. How is the street going to drain when it gets an enormous amount of water in it? Dredging is, I guess, a big item because every time I knocked on a door, not every time, but probably 80% of the time, people were very concerned about the dredging issue. And the reason they were concerned about the dredging issue, not because they had a boat at the marina, but because they realized the value of their home was tied to the ability to sell to a newcomer. You get to keep a boat in the town you live in, and you can walk to your boat and get out in the sound inside of 5 minutes. If we don't dredge, that's not going to be possible. There's two parts of the dredging. There's the harbor and there's a channel. The channel is going to be borne by the city. I think the cost is about $2 million, and the harbor is going to be borne by the marina itself. That's a much bigger, expensive project because it has some remediation issues with the soil. It can't be simply taken out and dumped. It needs to be tested and approved before dumping further away. And they recently decided not to do it this year, but next year, and that's going to save the town $500,000, and I'm all for that. But that to me is a very important task in front of the city.
Thank you, Ms. Fontana. Same question.
Well, again, I'm in agreement with Matt that it's flooding, and all of the related aspects of that. But there's one thing that I do hear a lot about, and I have experienced, and I don't know because we haven't really examined it closely enough how the funding would work. I don't know if it would fall under what one would normally consider capital expenses, but we have a real cell service problem, which is a public health and safety problem. If you live anywhere near Milton Point in particular, it's very difficult to get a signal. And this is something that I actually drove up to Poughkeepsie a couple of years back and testified about this to the Public Utilities Commission because it was that scary. When you lose power, which is another problem. So these are infrastructure related problems. Electricity, phone service, that's a life-saving part of your infrastructure that we can't ignore. I know cases where, again, elderly folks, but children living in homes where there's no power. Not everybody has a generator, not everybody has a Tesla wall. And if they lose power and then they lose cell service, they're desperate. You can't even call 911. Calls are going to Long Island. So this is something I hear far too much about. I know that there was a controversy a couple years ago about something called mini cell towers. And in fact, as a part of the sustainability committee, I went out with a gauge to see if we could figure out if it was actually giving off anything, just because we were curious. But regardless, the technology continues to move apace. So whatever was the solution in 2015 or 2016 is probably, we've outstripped that. So what are the latest things that we can be doing? And what are the ways that we can be protecting our citizens? To me, that is something that deserves a closer look.
Thank you. Mr. Fahey, any rebuttal?
Yeah, Lori raises some interesting points, but The cell phone tower issue. That is allowing others to spend the money to build the towers. The city itself would not look at that as an infrastructure project that we need to take on and spend money on. That's for the communications companies to do.
Ms. Fontana?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I was clear probably. I don't mean necessarily it's a cell tower solution. There are other solutions. What I guess what I'm saying is that I'd like to know, and Commissioner Kopi did this a couple of months ago when he looked at, okay, what is the disaster relief program? Where are people going to go? What's going on? I think we can't continue to just wait for the phone companies to show up and do something. We've tried that. It's not working. So it may not be an infrastructure per se, our cost, but I think it is our responsibility to figure out what the solutions are. And so whatever that looks like, I think that's something we need to address and not just hope that they will eventually come around and do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, next question. Name one issue the council voted to approve this year that you agree or disagree with, and why? Ms. Fontanes, you get this question first.
What do I agree with? Well, okay.
Agree or disagree?
Okay, disagree. No, I agree. I agree with stuff. No, but this came up, and I will. And full disclosure, I haven't watched the whole leaf blower thing, but I've watched it all along for years. This is a part of our community of sustainability people. I know many of the people who have testified. I know some of the landscapers as well. And so this issue about the leaf blower is I think disappointing in the end. It was under originally the leaf blowers, the gas powered leaf blowers were under a noise ordinance for a reason. And my understanding is that they have now actually lengthened the time that these blowers can be used, and then they're allowing, I believe, that the electric blowers can be used at other times where they weren't used before. So again, living on a small parcel as we do, it just adds to the noise. So I wish we had just tried a little bit harder and come up with a solution that protected our quality of life, our peace of mind, and yet still moved that ball down the field to get to a greener solution. So I would say I'm disappointed.
Same question, Mr. Fahey.
Yeah, I think that one recent change that the city council voted on and approved was concerned rock chipping. They recently changed the rock chipping law, whereas before we had 38 days, or the developers had 38 days to chip. Now it's down to 15 consecutive days, which really focuses and minimizes the amount of disruption that neighborhoods have to live through. They also, once a neighborhood suffers rock chipping for 15 days, there's a 90-day moratorium where there's no more rock chipping allowed for anyone, which gives them a nice, easy break if they're looking at 3 or 4 houses that are interested in chipping rock. This does not include weekends, and that's, I think, it really is helpful to the people who have been suffering for years with rock chipping. It's likely with this, though, we're liable to see more rock blasting, aka dynamiting, as a result. And while builders can appeal for additional time if they suffer extreme hardship, such as utility not being there when they have to be there to install something, they can appeal to the city manager. I do hope the city manager takes this very seriously, because he is impacting the quality of life of the people who live within that neighborhood. We do need to determine, however, if we want to continue allowing developers to detract from our quality of life. I get that land in Rye is valuable, and I get that people want to maximize their living space, and I get the fact that they want to see as much use out of their land as they can. And typically with height restrictions, that might require that they go down to get more space. I think these new restrictions are a sign of hope that we can allow people to have a better quality of life. And it doesn't yet resolve the situation, but it definitely makes it less harmful to the community.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Fontana?
I think I want to just add, of course, the rock chipping thing is near and dear to my heart. In 2015, it was one of the first things that I worked on with the Sustainability Committee, not with the committee per se, but because somebody reached out to me, heard I was on the sustainability committee, lived down the street from one of these giant projects and said, please help. I can't take this. I have elderly parents and it's just unendurable. And so we, a couple of us, we went out and we worked on this issue. There was no existing law before. People were chipping and blasting and making people's lives miserable. And out of that, we helped make real change happen at City Hall. And we now have something. And I think that was the end? No, I wish that there were one or two more limitations that would have really made a difference, but it was a compromise at the time and it was a step forward. And that's a victory.
Mr. Fahey.
I just have one clarification. The leaf blowing law has not actually been passed yet, but it does look, well, I shouldn't say it's going to be passed, but it has not yet been passed.
Okay.
So they haven't technically passed it yet.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. What topic have we not covered tonight that you would like to address? And Mr. Fahey, you get to tackle that one first.
Lucky me. Let me think. I had a list here. Playland. Let's talk about Playland. Big neighborhood in our area. They have essentially, the county owned it and operated it for years. They recently, the past couple of years, after some lengthy contractual disputes and discussions, allowed Standard Amusements to take over the operation of Playland. And full disclosure, by the way, Standard Amusements is a client of mine. We are redoing all of their keying. So if anybody wants a free ticket or a free key to the park, just let me know. They've done a great job. I've seen a lot of work in the past year in the park, and they have done a phenomenal job, I should say a phenomenal job in building out the infrastructure to make it modern, safer, and more appealing. They will also be offering additional rides as well. The city currently has presented them with a tax bill that was unexpected. The number I heard was 3.6 million. Standard Amusements was somewhat shocked by that. I think this is going to require some very careful negotiation with Standard Amusements. They should pay something. They use our services in the city. Oftentimes police are called in to help direct traffic for Playland. If there's a fire, who are you going to call? You're going to call the Rye Fire Department. So they should pay some in taxes. Is 3.6 million too much? I think it probably is. That's something that we really need to focus on. Obviously, if we get just a fraction of the 3.6 million, that would help every resident in Rye. We all pay for the services that we all use. Playland should too, in my opinion, or Standard Amusements should too, in my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Fontanes. The same question.
I want to talk about trees. We touched on it, but not as a direct question. And it's after flooding and after the development issue writ large, trees are something that comes up far more than you would imagine. They wouldn't seem to be that controversial, but there are people who love trees just for their own sake. But I'm not talking about that per se. I am talking about the fact that trees are such a valuable part of what makes Rye Rye, and they need to be managed, obviously, because one of the other things with these power outages is that compared to other jurisdictions right next to us, we seem to lose power an awful lot. So so we need to care for our trees, and we need to understand the role that they play in our community in terms of the quality of life. Again, we lost a bunch of trees on our street with all of the construction, and it's actually hotter. It was 20 degrees hotter with next to the parcel that had no more trees compared to 2 houses down the street. So there are heat effects and also ecosystem effects. We love the animals, the birds, and all of them, believe it or not, pollinators need oak trees. So there's a relationship there, but I guess we have to just focus also on flooding. Trees, mature trees, not these little arborvitae shrubs that they stick in place of a beautiful tree that they cut down. They do nothing for flooding. And so I understand that by law, they have to keep stormwater on the property after you've developed it. but this seems that we need to relook at this much more closely and update the tree ordinance finally.
Rebuttal, Mr. Fahey?
With respect to trees, I think that, I love trees. We have got several trees in our property. When I first moved into our house, I wanted to cut some down and my wife said, not so fast, Buster. Let's see what it becomes like in a year from now. And you grow to love these things, but they are living things. They eventually die, whether from exposure to salt air, whether from storm damage, whether from just insects or some sort of pestilence. And we need to be careful to restrict people from cutting down trees when the trees need to come down and that they present a danger to property or lives. So I do think that we have to tread very carefully here. It's difficult to tell a homeowner, you can't take that tree down. I don't care how much you want that view because I like that tree better than you and it's not my property and I don't pay taxes for it. So we have to tread very carefully here.
Ms. Fontana, anything to add?
Just two little things. One is that it's usually a lot of times now it's developers, not homeowners necessarily, that are causing the clear cutting that we're talking about. And second of all, I want to say to Matt that I am excited that he has evolved, and I thank Missy for this too, because I know that a couple of years ago his point of view was different about it. He wrote a very funny little piece for My Rye about trees, and I don't care how long it takes. I'm just happy that he is now with us on the tree front. Thank you, Matt.
Evolution is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Okay, the next question. Which of the city's many commissions and committees are you most passionate about that you would lobby for city resources or policy changes? And Ms. Fontanes, you get that first.
Well, on the time that I was on CCAC or Sustainability Committee, we didn't have resources. We had, I think, a couple $100, I want to say. I wasn't a treasurer or anything, so I don't know. But I mean, the idea always was that it was completely volunteer and there was no budget, there was no funding. So the answer to your question is up from zero. Anything would be potentially fabulous for these committees and commissions, in particular, who are doing programming. Because if it depends on the, I don't know that the Board of Appeals needs a budget for something like that. But certainly the Sustainability Committee and groups that are going out into the community and as a part of their mission is actually to educate, then they're interacting. We were always interacting with various of the organizations around town, Rye Nature Center, Rye Art Center, J Heritage, Wainwright House, and there's always a need for marketing. There was a need for sometimes procurement of a space or a speaker, things like that. And so even a little bit of money towards that would help, make the mission happen. And so I would say if I was going to choose, because they're near and dear to my heart, I think I would love to see those conservation commission committees get a little bit more help if possible.
Mr. Fahey, same question.
Sorry, Mark, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Which of the city's many commissions and committees are you most passionate about that you would lobby for city resources or policy changes?
Okay, I wanted to make sure you weren't including city departments like fire and safety.
This was committees and
yes.
commissions.
I would say the Boat Basin Commission. I think that the Boat Basin adds really a rare thing for most places in Westchester, if not the only one. It's one of the few that offers public access for a small fee. And it is the Boat Basin Committee is served by volunteers who really need to improve their game, I'd say. I'd love to see more power given to them to change what needs to be changed. I think right now there's a waiting list. To me, anytime I hear of a waiting list for a public utility, to me, that symbolizes that we're not charging enough and we could get more money out of the people who are willing to pay more. That might not sound fair, but I think it's terribly unfair to say I've lived here for 15 years and I get a boat and I've had a boat for 5 years. You're going to have to wait your turn for 10 years before you get the opportunity to partake in this. So it's I'd love to see that charged, just some changes made there. Let's face it, if they charge more, they could have more funds to pay for dredging. It's not a bad thing to think about.
Okay, Ms. Fontanes, is there a rebuttal?
No, I think the boat basin people are amazing. Joe Pecora is doing great work, and there are people who are extremely passionate about the boat basin here.
Okay. Mr. Fahey, anything?
Nope. I'm good.
Okay, so we are on our 10th and final question. What is your position on food scrap recycling and also a pay for service for weekly pickup? And Mr. Fahey, you get that one first.
Okay, we don't do a lot of food scrap recycling in our household. What typically happens is I come home at 8 o'clock and I eat whatever's left. So we don't really have that problem, but I understand a bunch of concerned and dedicated volunteers wanted to start a food scrapping program or scrap program. There's still some public drop-off spots. They had a trial for a number of months, and the city council took a good hard look at it and realized that for the benefit that it is providing, the drawbacks were outweighing the benefits. And they didn't say it's banned, but they did say it needs more work. And I'd love to see some of those concerns raised by the city council addressed and thought about and improved upon. I think it could be a great thing if we have it where it's economically sustainable. And it would be beneficial if people who are interested in this, it's hard to hear, but when somebody tells you this isn't quite good enough, I think the worst thing you could do is to say, that's it, I quit. And you should go back and try to figure out a better way to do it. I'd be all for it if they could make it sustainable economically. I think a lot of people were definitely interested in it and felt very passionate for it. But we shouldn't be doing something to make ourselves feel good if it doesn't make sense financially.
Great. Ms. Fontanes.
Oh, yes, this one is near and dear to my heart as well. And I wrote an opinion piece for the Rye Record about it a couple years ago now, I think. My grandmother in Philadelphia actually had food scraps pickup. It's a part of the regular garbage pickup. And in fact, doing it that way is the only way to make it economically sound. I agree again with Matt on this. The model that they used was it was supposed to be just a short pilot, and it was never intended, I think, for it to go to be exactly like this model. They learned a few things and COVID hit. And so it's very difficult. It skewed some of the contours of the project. But at the end of the day, if this becomes a part of the entire garbage pickup system, we will save money. Food scraps are heavy, they're wet. The county has already lowered the tipping costs for this service for municipalities who are participating. It's just something that needs to be scaled up, like any project that you're doing. And I think that over time, again, I agree, if we work together, we can come up with a solution. It wasn't a permanent solution, but I truly believe a permanent solution can save the taxpayers money and achieve those sustainable goals that we all want.
Did you have anything further to clarify, Mr. Fahey?
Nope, I do not.
And Ms. Fontanes?
Nope.
No. Okay, then it's time for your closing remarks. And Mr. Fahey, you get to go first.
Thank you. We've all heard some very interesting questions put to us and answers this evening given by Ms. Fontanes and myself. I would again thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate, for John and Roz for timing, and for others who organized the event. These debates are fun. They provide a lot of opportunity for viewers to get a better understanding of the candidates, which isn't always possible from palm cards and knocks on doors. I know full well the importance of listening to various points of view. I know from past experience that contentious debates and disputes within our city usually end up in front of the city council for resolution. And it's absolutely critical for the city council to listen carefully to all sides. And it's even more important for the council to make decisions to resolve the issues as best as possible for the benefit of the entire community. You might look at my opponent and myself and wonder where we differ, because we seem to agree on a lot of things. Flooding, number one, we had a couple of differences, but they weren't extraordinarily wild in differences. You might think that, we didn't talk about the master plan. I have heard from Lori before that we both agree that it needs to be updated. It's high time. It's well over 40 years. We both agree that we need to update our efforts to improve flood mitigation and continue the fight to keep the waters at bay. But there's one big difference between us, and that's a huge difference. I've done the job before. I know what I'm getting into. I can and will hit the ground running on day one. Day one, by the way, is not January 1st for me. It is November 9th when the budget hearings begin. That's a big, big part of the council's job. While I would not be an elected official at that point, I would certainly be wanting to know as much as possible of what the discussion is all about and what they're thinking about at that time. We are also running to complete the unexpired term of 1 year for Rich Mecca. That's only a single year. 6 of the 7 council members have come out publicly to support my candidacy. And I believe that it's not a reputation of my opponent as much as it is a desire to work with somebody who is a seasoned veteran and already has years of experience under the belt. There's going to be some tough decisions to make in the coming years. And if I'm on the council, I'll do everything I can to address the very real threat of flooding and to listen to every single voice that is opined on for any subject in front of us. And thank you all. And I wish to see you at the polls on Tuesday.
Thank you. Ms. Fontanes, your turn.
Thank you. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to Matt Fahey for participating in this conversation with me tonight. And also, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to make my case directly to my fellow Rye residents. There are 3 key things I want you to think about as you make your choice for the next city council member. First of all, please know that there is nothing in the city charter that says you have to be a city council member before you get to be a city council member. I believe that it's important to open up the council to new members on a regular basis. And furthermore, I believe that's what the citizens want as well. Matt himself said something similar in his written comments to the Rye Record last week. He suggested we needed new blood on the boards and commissions, since that will bring in new perspectives and ideas for improvement. And I couldn't have said it better myself. My experience in governance goes back decades, as I have served on nonprofit boards since 1990. And I've learned so much spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours on volunteer projects across this city. And I'm willing and able to do more. Second, regarding this issue of which candidate will be better on the environment, because this seems to be an issue that Matt is a part of it as well now, which is exciting. I think the answer is clear though. My track record on sustainability, not just serving on CCAC, et cetera, but my professional work and the many other projects in which I participated in and across Rye and across the county. As happy as I am about all of this, I do think that there is a difference between saying you will do something and actually having done it. So I will be ready day one to share my extensive experience on the environment, on sustainability, on flooding, and on community concerns with my fellow council members. Finally, I promise that I'll be there for you, residents of Rye, and the entire Rye community. I will show up for you. I will work hard for you. And yes, I will be your voice at City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates for their willingness to serve in a volunteer capacity, and to all of you for your community involvement. Thank you also to our League of Women Voters team who put this forum together. This candidate forum will be available for viewing on Rye City's Verizon and Cablevision public access TV stations and on an on-demand basis at the League's Facebook page, facebook.com/LWVRRBPC. Remember to vote. Election day is Tuesday, November 8th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Polling places along with information on voting can be found at www.ryeny.gov or by calling the Rye City Clerk's office. Early voting is in progress now and concludes on Saturday, November 5th. Details of locations and hours are available on the Westchester County Board of Elections website. And that concludes our candidate forum for this evening. Good night to all.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.